So let's turn our attention to the Silk Road. The first week we talked about the Silk Road and really that it's a series of routes that go different directions. The next week we talked about where some of the places were that were connected by the Silk Roads, that is, looking at the cities. Last week we talked about who the people were that lived along there and some of the people who traveled along the Silk Road. And today what I want to look at is, so what kinds of things were carrying, what kinds of exchanges took place, what was going from point A to point B. So the Silk Road really consisted of long distance travel routes, activities, economic activities that spanned a very broad area, basically from Constantinople or beyond, depending on how you kind of define that western terminus, to Xi'an, which was the capital of China. One thing that I've mentioned before but needs to be emphasized, that a lot of the trade was local. And so the Silk Road really provided a way of moving local goods as opposed to things that are going all the way from China to Rome. An important point was that there was a lot of money that moved to the northwest from Xi'an, for example, into Dunhuang, that really had a major role on the economy of the Silk Road, because there were garrisons there of soldiers that were in place to ensure the safe travel, or ensure it as much as possible. This flow really accounted for a lot of the flourishing Silk Road trade, particularly at the height of the Tang Dynasty. The middle of the 8th century was a key turning point. There were a lot of things that were happening. There was a rebellion against the Tang Emperor, and basically this caused the Chinese to withdraw a lot of the troops from Central Asia. They had to go back to protect Xi'an. This then led to a period of great conflict between the non-Chinese dynasties, which really interrupted the eastern half of the Silk Road. So you've got the Uyghurs coming in from the north. We haven't talked that much about them, but there was a lot of unrest, particularly in this area around Xinjiang, what's now Xinjiang, and in western China. A big turning point began in the 8th century, continuing in the 11th, when Arab armies under the banner of Islam conquered the western half of the Silk Road, which continued to thrive. So we've got Islam moving into Persia and then pushing forward from there into Central Asia. And at about the same time, because of a lot of this conflict, the focus shifted to sea routes, beginning between the major Chinese cultural centers and shipping centers, the coastal cities in India, but then also from the Arabian Peninsula along the coast of what is now Afghanistan, well, Pakistan, India, so that there were sea routes. And these began to take on an increasingly important role. Well, one of the key things that took place at this time was in 751, the Battle of Talas. Talas is right here. So here is the Fergana Valley, which is now part of Uzbekistan. Here is, we're over here in the Dunhuang. And basically, we have Arab troops, or Islamic troops, both Persians and Arabs, moving into this area, and then along the way, recruiting help to fight against the Chinese that are ensconced in this area. So Arab and Persian Muslims, along with these various converts that they picked up along the way from Bukhara, which would have been Sogdians, and Samarkand, and also, you saw on the map, there are blue arrows that came up from Tibet. They marshaled all these troops and defeated the Chinese army. So basically, this stopped the westward expansion of the Chinese, and really established this strong Islamic presence, basically going from the Mediterranean into what is now Central Asia. A key thing that happened here was that they captured a lot of prisoners. And the prisoners included a number of artisans who were then taken back from what was Western China into Central Asia, particularly to Samarkand. And they played a key role in moving ideas and trade goods from China into Central Asia and then from there on westward. One of the goods that they made and that had been made in China that now were transported into Central Asia was paper making. Paper making was invented in China. I'll show you that in just a minute. So they basically took paper making techniques from China into Central Asia and from there diffused into the Mediterranean basin. So that's a westward movement of paper and the skill of paper making. They also captured Chinese silk workers. There have been a few isolated instances of silk being transported out of China before this. But this was really a key period when massive numbers of silk workers were captured. And then this led to the dissemination of Chinese sericulture, silk culture, into Transoxiana and Central Asia, and then on into Western Europe. I pointed out a somewhat of a change in the trade routes or expansion of trade routes. This became much more important to moving to sea routes once the Europeans found out that they could sail from Europe into Asia. And in the 15th century, European explorers and merchants began to go around the Cape of Good Hope, opened up basically uninterrupted sea routes to the east. And this was a major change. So initially, sea routes along the coast, but then once the Europeans got involved, they had the ability to move large ships, meet Chinese vessels, which were huge, down in the Southeast Asia area, say in what's now Indonesia, and transport goods in much larger quantities than you could do on a camel caravan. And there's a whole new area of underwater archaeology that's uncovering these ships. And one had about 50,000 ceramic porcelain bowls on its way from China. We try to imagine how many camels it would take to transport 50,000 bowls. So, what are some of the kinds of goods that were traded? Well, clearly silk and silk textiles, and we'll talk specifically about what some of these were in just a minute. Lacquerware and porcelain from China. They did not know how to make porcelain in Europe. They had clay vessels, but not the well-fired pieces that characterize China. Sandalwood moved from India up both east and west, up into Persia and also into China. So some what we would consider to be delicacies, if you will, moved from Persia into China. Saffron being a key example of that. Pistachio nuts, dates moving from Persia, both up to the east and to the west. Somalia on the Horn of Africa was important from a point of view of shipment of goods, and particularly their myrrh and frankincense, both of which were prized for their use both as embalming, but for incense as well. Glass bottles from Egypt, there's just all kinds of things. This is just something of a short list of a few examples. Important was the movement of plants. And there are a number that moved from the west to the east into China. Grapevines, alfalfa, plants such as cucumbers, figs, pomegranates, walnuts, all of these moved from Persia and areas of the Mediterranean basin into China. Herbs and spices, the importance of spices and herbs in the culinary traditions of the East are important. Sesame, chives, coriander, safflower. Fruits, including pears, peaches, and oranges, and flowers. So there are all these various kinds of plant imports. There were also plants that went the other way. Apples originated in Central Asia, in what is now Kazakhstan. So, just looking at Tang China, for example, this side, we've got garlic, peas, spinach, and mustard. Also, the art of sugar making came into Tang China from India, and along with grapes for making wine, both from India, but probably more importantly from Central Asia. This is a woodcut that shows grapes moving from the Fergana Valley into China in the 2nd century BCE. That's very early in the time of the Silk Road, but the movement of grapes, a whole new industry of viniculture. So what are some of the kinds of things that went out from Tang China during this time that's considered to be the heyday of the Silk Road? Well, I've identified 4 here. There are others, a couple of others that are important are gunpowder and the compass. But silk, paper, tea, and ceramics. All of these were imported from Tang China, exported from Tang China, and found their way to the markets of the Mediterranean. So these are the kinds of things from the long distance perspective that the Silk Road is famous for. Going back, there are also the local exchanges, but the long distance included these as major exports from China. So the goods themselves, but also the technologies that were involved in their production. So let's start looking at silk. I've referred to the fact that silk got smuggled out of China a few times, but basically it was a key component of the Silk Road, therefore the name. It may not have been the most important, but it was certainly prevalent. A lot of massive quantities of silk. It had many forms, many uses, including used as currency, for battle flags, and of course for dress. Most of the silk that moved along the Silk Road was in the form of plain weave or tabby silk, which could be used as is, dyed or unwoven to get different types of fabrics depending on what people's desires were, either heavy or lightweight. So how old is silk? Well, most people suggest that probably it was discovered somewhere in the 3rd millennium BCE, that is about 4,500 years ago. And there are not silk remnants, but silk cocoons from that area. Silkworms from the Western Zhou dynasty, that's an early Chinese dynasty, and have been dated to about 1000 BCE. So those are archaeological remnants of silkworms. So how's silk made? Well, silk is a natural protein. The silk fiber is like spider webs. It's unwound from the cocoons of the caterpillar stage of the moth Bombyx mori. These caterpillars are fed on mulberry leaves. They develop a cocoon, the next stage of the development of the moth. In order, so you've got worms that go through a pupal stage and develop into moths. Well, the moths want to get out of the cocoons, but if the moths get out of the cocoons, then that breaks the silk fiber. And so what they do is they basically boil the moths in the cocoons before they can get out, and then they take the cocoon, unreel the fiber, single filament, and the filaments from a single cocoon can be up to a mile long. They then take multiple filaments, spin them into thread. Thread is dyed, woven into fabrics of various types. And so basically this is the kind of the life cycle of silk. That's all summarized in one slide. Here, this is in Western China. You can see the cocoons in the front being boiled. You can see the woman spinning the yarn or thread down to the lower left, and then the fibers being pulled out to the right. Well, this encapsulates it, but let's look a little bit more detail about what really goes on. These are silkworms. They have one goal in life. That's to eat a lot of mulberry leaves and then develop into a pupa within a cocoon. Here are some examples of cocoons, using a dime for scale. So these are cocoons placed on top of mulberry leaves as an example. This is done in large scale. You can see literally thousands of cocoons that are here in a contemporary silk factory. So it's a complex process, and that's why, first of all, the Chinese wanted to guard it, didn't want anybody to know it, and then once it got out, required an enormous amount of investment in developing the facilities to grow the mulberry leaves. That's all they live on is mulberry trees, mulberry leaves. So if you want to have a silk industry, you've got to be someplace where mulberry trees can grow. So these are cocoons. They are awaiting their fate. Here's their fate. They are boiled in pots, and then you can see the filaments from the individual cocoons being pulled out. And then these filaments will be woven into thread. This shows the contemporary spinning wheel with making thread from these multiple combinations of filaments. The thread then will be dyed. Traditionally, the dyes were all were plant products. Interesting stories about the development of dyes. And some places still use the traditional things like walnut for brown, cochineal for red, and so on. This is simply just a couple of pictures of a large dyeing vat to the left, and then pulling dye out, or pulling threads out on your right. This is an old Chinese, I used this slide before. This just simply shows an old Chinese loom, the weaving of silk on a loom. And when I'm going to start a series in 2 weeks. When I do traveling on the Silk Road now, I'll show you some contemporary silk factories. But this basically just shows a very large loom and the silk being woven, the threads being woven into cloth. Well, as I've said many times, the processes, the techniques for sericulture were really well guarded by the Chinese. Basically, anyone who was caught trying to smuggle out silkworms or mulberry cocoons outside of China would be put to death. So you had carried a high risk. That risk was associated with reward, because if you can get something out where you basically got a monopoly on sericulture, on the production of silk, it becomes a very precious commodity. And it was highly sought from countries throughout the Mediterranean early in time. And about the 4th century BCE, in fact, the Romans and the Greeks began talking about Ceres, the kingdom of the silk, or the kingdom of silk. They knew that there was someplace out to the east where this fabric was being produced. So once trade began, within a few decades, Chinese silks were widely worn by the rulers and ruling families, noble families in Rome, and by 300 CE, the wearing of silk had spread basically to all classes. So it started out that, in fact, there were restrictions on who in the Roman Empire could wear silk. It was restricted to nobility and royalty, but then after a while, it became so prevalent that everybody could have silk. And, you know, people have reported, from a historical perspective, that the demand for silk was so great that the Romans were sending all their money to China, and it had a great deal of impact on the Roman economy. This is early on. So because of this economic importance, and you know, there was a great deal of interest in being able to produce it. So if you look at the economies of silk, basically it was used as currency, among other things. It was just not just a luxury, but a key factor in the Eurasian economy. Silk was used to pay domestic taxes in China. People would grow mulberry trees, have silkworms, produce silk thread and tabby silk as a cottage industry. And then this would be sold to traders or could be used to pay your taxes. So it was a highly valuable commodity. Basically, silk was used to pay for the construction of the maintenance of military garrisons, which played such a key role in the security of the Silk Road, particularly in the western regions of China. So this is really focusing more or less on the impact on China. It was also used for foreign exchange. And the Chinese gave nomadic troops in the north large quantities of silk, basically to two things. One, to buy horses, but the other was to placate them. And so silk played a key role in the control of the silk, or the steppe peoples. And initially, particularly, it was a high value commodity, and was used for conspicuous consumption. As I noted earlier, in the case of Rome, silk was initially totally exotic, expensive, and therefore was a mark of status. Well, breaking the monopoly. As I've said a number of times, the methods of sericulture were held as closely guarded secrets by the Chinese. It's thought that perhaps the first time that silk escaped from the heartland of China was in Khotan. That's one of the cities on the southern Silk Road. And either in the 2nd or the 4th century, a princess who was going to wed the king of Khotan smuggled silkworms and eggs, silkworm eggs and mulberry seeds in her headdress. And that's how silk got first into the western regions of what's now China. Then Persia was next, so it moved from Khotan along the trade routes into Persia, and in about the 4th century, silk trade was highly influenced and very important in Persia. In 533, 2 monks, with the support of the Byzantine emperor, Justinian, used a hollow cane to smuggle silkworms into the Byzantine Empire. They already had mulberry leaves, mulberry trees, and basically this then led to an indigenous Byzantine silk production, and then a monopoly on silk production in Europe, and then from there it moves into places like France, Italy, and so on. So, but basically, the key thing is started in China, moved along the Silk Road in kind of fits and starts, and then was subsequently established in the West. So that's silk. Well, how about paper? The invention of paper is considered to be one of the high points in the development of civilization, because it allowed the broad, widespread proliferation of information, of books and so on, that could be transmitted to populations. And so the role of paper making is particularly important. This is a slide that shows early paper making in China. It's made from the bark of the mulberry tree. The bark is stripped from the trees. It's then the inner layer is taken out. It's boiled. The fibers are pounded into a pulp. Then the pulp is placed into a large container. A frame is put into the container, pulls the fibers out, so you have a thin sheet of papers or fibers within the frame. You then take the paper out of the frame and dry it, and it's usually done by hanging it, placing it on a wall. Excuse me. I didn't follow my first rule. So to illustrate this, this is in contemporary Samarkand. This is a paper factory in Samarkand that still makes paper this old-fashioned way with mulberry. You can see here these women are stripping the inner layer off the bark. That inner layer is separated out. And then it is put into big mills. You can see there's a series of pots here. So those will be filled with the fibers that have been stripped off those plants. And then you can see the pistons that basically crush the fiber. This is the interior view. You look at it here, you can see a little bit better how those pistons come down, basically smash the paper. We missed one. So this is the outside. Sorry, this thing has a mind of its own sometimes. This is outside. There's water coming here, and basically a water wheel here. Oh, sorry, it didn't work if I pointed my screen. A water channel here, a wheel. It turns this cam, and that cam then raises and lifts and these large timbers. The timbers at the other end are here. So we were outside, now we're inside, coming down and compressing the paper, or the fibers which will become paper. Again, just another shot of that process. That fiber then is taken out of those bits, put into water, into solution. So this is basically all the pieces, little pieces from the mulberry bark. This frame is placed in here and then pulled up with a thin layer. They shake it so it's a thin, constant layer of fiber. Then the next step is to take it out of the frame. And you can see there's the piece of paper from, or what will be paper from that frame. It's then put on a wall, a flat surface to dry, smoothed out, and so you can see here paper in various stages of drying. Well, paper became very important during the time of the Tang Dynasty. We have Buddhist writings and relics that flowed along the pilgrimage routes from India to China. We had Sanskrit works on medicine, astronomy, mathematics, music transmitted from India to China. Block printing was developed in China in the early 8th century, and then this block printing allowed the development of multiple copies of books using pages of text that were initially on carved wooden blocks. And as I noted a minute ago, the development of printing really meant that works of art or works of literature, of science, of any kind, all kinds of documents of particular cultural and historical importance could be disseminated to a wider public. Prior to this, we had papyrus in Egypt. You had the use of animal skins like vellum, parchment in the Middle East. But the development of paper led to this ability then to, the next step is printing. This is an early example from China. This is a Buddhist parachute, woodblock print. The way woodblock printing it involves is that there is a block in each of these characters that's been carved way around it, so that you've got a block that allows a copy to be made onto paper. This is considered to be the first printed book. This is actually a scroll. It's the Diamond Sutra. And the earliest example of this comes from Cave 17 at Dunhuang. It is now in the British Library in London. This is considered to be the first example of a printed book, the Diamond Sutra. They also began to make bound books, and this is a very early bound book. This was, again, woodblock prints, but the ability to make multiple copies of things using paper was important. They also, with varying degrees of success, made paper money. And this shows you a wood block, the way the things that's been cut away, and then money that was printed off this. That's a whole different story. The use of various kinds of currencies, of coinage and so on. And at first, paper currency was not very successful. And it basically was not as I guess, consistently valuable as was a piece of silver or a piece of bronze or a piece of copper, where you had a physical object that represented the value, as opposed to a piece of paper that says someplace there's some money behind this. So we've got silk, we've got paper, we've got tea. And beginning later in the Song Dynasty, 11th and 12th centuries, tea became important, increasingly important in Chinese exports. A lot of bureaucracy developed around regulating the trade of tea and of horses. A couple of products that had particularly important roles and legislation and mechanisms to control and to tax them. This is an old, on the left, an old silk print of a woman with tea, and here's on your right is an example of how tea was traded. It's traded in very large blocks. Some of you may be familiar with in Tibet. This is the way still tea is sold, is in these solid blocks. So, as I said before, there were a number of exotic imports during the Tang Dynasty, and these really were available only to the upper echelons of Chinese society. Some of these included glass goblets from Byzantium, horses from the western areas, crystals and agates from Samarkand, medicine, Buddhist scriptures from India, jade from Khotan. There's a very special kind of jade in Khotan, and cotton from Turfan. That's in that Turfan Depression. So we talked about the things that were exported: tea, paper making, silk. These are some of the things that were imported. A key import during Tang China were horses. And these were horses from the Fergana Valley, particularly, but also from other areas in the west. And so these were probably among the most highly valued of the imports. The most highly valued of the exports would be silk. Horses were a status symbol in Tang China, and fish are displayed or presented very extensively in Tang art and ceramics. So, as an example, here is a ceramic of a horse, again during this Tang period. A very interesting technology that moved from the west into the east was a system of irrigation known as qanats in Persia, or cars in Central Asia. Remember that we pointed out when we talked about cities, they needed to have water. And so one of the ways of getting water into an area is to have a system of irrigation canals that bring water from the mountains of snowmelt down into the oasis and into the cities. And this is a system that was first developed in Persia, where it's known as qanat, or cars in Central Asia. And basically what you have mountains here. Those mountains have snow. The snow runs off. It's caught here. And a underground passageway, a pipeline, is developed that carries the water from here down into the town, or into the village in this case. This is a long underground channel, and then there are approaches to it. Well, here, I'm sorry. Here's the channel down here. These are access to it to allow it to be kept cleaned out. I'm not making that very clear. So let's look at it in a slightly different perspective. This shows it better. You get water from melted snow. There's a channel here, it's underground canal, and there are vertical wells that allow the canal to be kept clear. Basically, if you were transporting water that far above ground, it would evaporate. So you'd have a lot of water loss. So what this does is it protects the water by allowing it to travel in these underground canals. This is a model that shows here's the canal, here are the wells that they used to clear it out. If you look at it from an aerial view, this shows you, this is in Xinjiang. All of these are individual canals, and you can see that this is material that's been cleared out to keep the canals flowing. Well, one of the things that requires irrigation is rice. Large quantities of paddy rice requires irrigation, and rice reached Iran in about the 4th century BCE, probably originating in India. Rice, it's interesting, usually when we think about the importance of rice, we think about China, Korea, and Japan. Well, rice is key in the diet in large areas of Central Asia. You may have heard of or had plov. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. But rice is also essential in the Persian or in Iranian diet. And a number of their key dishes, in fact, are rice dishes. So rice is important. Alfalfa was moved from the west into the east. This is alfalfa that was used to feed the heavenly horses from Fergana. The heavenly horses were the ones that were thought to sweat blood. They're very highly prized, and alfalfa was developed as an agricultural crop to support their fodder. Other plants that moved from Persia into China were melons and refined sugar. If you've ever traveled in Central Asia or Western China, you realize the importance of melons in the economy, and the melons are really good. There are literally hundreds of varieties, and you see them during season stacked up by farmers along the road. Interestingly, one of the most famous melons in China is the Hami melon, H-A-M-I, and I got one at Sever the other day. First time I've seen them here. But anyhow, melons were very important. And then the refining of sugar moved from Persia and India into China. Cotton originated in India, moved particularly into Central Asia, where it became a major cash crop over time, but originating in India. Then we've got good stuff like opium, moving from the Middle East, particularly Afghanistan, moving along the trade routes into Central Asia, and then of course into Europe as well, but originating in the Middle East. Chess. The Persians claim the invention of chess. Indians claim it as well. But, some place in that heartland between what's now Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and current Iran was the development of chess as a game. And you can see it's illustrated. This is an old Persian miniature, and also illustrated here, but a very popular game. Also backgammon here. And then finally, the sport of kings, polo. This is a Tang Chinese sculpture with a polo player, and then this is a Persian miniature showing the early example of polo. There are other games that are played on horseback. One of the favorite ones in Kazakhstan is they take a goat carcass, cut the head off, and then they charge around trying to steal it, carrying it on horseback, stealing it from one another. So games played on horses became very important. And so I will stop there and entertain any questions. Thank you. Yeah, Tom?
On that silk fiber that's unwrapped.
Yeah.
What's it like? I mean, I'm thinking of those spiders.
It's about the same
It's
size.
sticky, but it wouldn't be.
No, it's not sticky after when it's been boiled. They can handle it. So it really made. That's a good question. Question was the silk. What are the silk fibers like? Are they sticky? And they don't seem to be. They don't congregate, if you will, so that they maintain that single filament, and then they're spun and twisted into thread. Good question. Okay, I'll see you all next week.